Any type of building code, whether or not it's plumbing, electrical, mechanical, building, fire, any of them can be no doubt about it. I'm a building inspector and I still get confused. Building codes are thick, they're hard to read. It's almost like reading law books or something like that. And but the great thing is about residential and homeowner code is that it's relegated to one book for the most part. Now you might have some amendments, and there could be quite a few amendments from your state, your city, your county, wherever it is that you live. But in general, there's one book that governs residential family and duplexes. So single family and duplex units, and that is the IRC. The IRC is the International Residential Code, and it looks like this. IRC, International Residential Code, International Residential Code for 1 and 2 family, and then it says dwellings right here. So that's cool, right? You get to focus on one book. So if you're out there, you're getting ready to do your projects, you're thinking like, well, I can just look online, right? I can just type in XYZ and it'll pop up and it'll tell me what you need. Yes, there is all kinds of stuff out there, codes, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. But if you're wanting to know for sure, you can't get information from your building department or your inspector, or maybe you don't need a permit and you're just out there doing it on your own, but you want to know so you can do it right, well, the IRC is where you want to start. And you want to pick the one that is governs your state. So codes are updated every 3 years, and not all states adopt them at that rate. So there might be some states that work under a 2015, 2018, 2021 codes. Just if you're going to get one, make sure you get the one that works for your state, right? So then it comes down to, well, how the hell do I read this thing? You know, it's a bunch of gibberish, right? So first thing is go to your index. Your index is your saving grace. Those books can be so thick, and depending on what it is that you're trying to look for, just go straight to the index. Don't spend your time flipping through each page. Try to figure out which chapter you're at, and if you go into the index and you're thinking like, I'm looking for this and it's not there, think about what else it could be called, because the book might have it put in the index but just in a different section. Sometimes water heaters can be under, can have all kinds of information in it, and you're thinking like, well, it should have been over here, but it's under water heaters for some reason. That's just an example, but there's all kinds of stuff in the code book about that. Then when you finally figure out is where you want to go, and you have to decipher all the information that's given. So first, let's take a quick peek at just kind of what the index might look like. So here you can see index, and it just breaks it down. It tells you which section to go to within the book. Appliances, and this is just an example, right? There's tons of pages that go through the index and different sections of it, allowable spans right here for floor joists, headers, rafters. But then you might go into framing in there, and it might list some of these items as well, or it might tell you to go back to this section. Just at the end of the day, use your index. The other place you might want to go is definitions. If you can't find anything, you can't find what you're looking for, go to definitions. There's been multiple times that I've spent, 10, 15 minutes going through the code book trying to find something, and I'm like, it's just in definitions. It's the defining some specific thing that I needed to know about. And that's chapter 2. So now that you've figured out, okay, this is kind of how I navigate it. Now let's see about, well, how do we read through it? So I jumped in here and I just grabbed glazing and windows. And you'll see glazing in an individual fixed or operable panel that meets all of the following conditions shall be considered to be hazardous location. So when you see the word shall, they're telling you this, this is what you are required to do. But then they will usually give you an exception, or they'll tell you, one of these items must, only one of them must be present, or in this particular instance, all 4. And so this shall be considered a hazardous location, but you have to meet all 4 of these criteria in order for it to be considered a hazardous location. And then on top of it, these are the exceptions. So if all of these are present, but it's decorative glazing, well, you don't have to consider it a hazardous location. You don't have to temper it, right? Because it's decorative glazing. Here they're telling you where you have a walking surface with a horizontal rail. So they're saying, well, if you put a handrail or some type of guardrail in front of that window, well, now you don't have to temper it. In this particular instance, even if it met all of these requirements. So you can see how it can get confusing, right? You know, you're looking through the code book and you're like, well, I just want to know, do I have to, for example, have to install tempered glazing in this location? Well, you read through it and it's like, well, yes, I do. And then you read a little more and you say, well, no, I don't. But if you're just looking on the internet, it might only give you half of that. It might not give you the whole thing. It might not tell you what the exceptions are. So that's why it might be important to know how to read a code book or have one handy if you're doing any major projects. Now, granted, any little stuff, I'm sure you can find what you need online and you don't need to go buy a code book to do it. But if you do, this kind of gives you an idea on how to read through it. What else might happen is that you might end up going to different sections. So let's see, if you were to go into here, this is emergency escape and rescue openings. Here we have exceptions, so they're just telling you in here that you shall have one. In these particular instances, basements, habitable attics, and every sleeping room shall have not less than one emergency escape and rescue opening. But then here's your exceptions. And here it's talking about an automatic sprinkler system, but it must be installed in accordance with P2904. Okay. Well, now you got to go over to P, which is plumbing, 2904, and you got to read about sprinkler systems and what the requirement is for the sprinkler systems. If you're going to install one, and then you have to decide, well, am I going to install one or am I going to install the emergency escape and rescue opening? If you already have sprinklers, but they're not up to that code requirement, so you still need the window, you can see how it can get really confusing, right? But what that's called is just finding a path through the code, right? So it's a code path to the answer that you're looking for. So just know that when you dive into it, you might have to go to other sections, you might have to bounce around until you find that path to the answer you need. So just keep that all in mind. If you are out there, you're doing a project, you decide to get a code book and go through it, I want to try to make it as easy as possible for you to get through it. But just know, even inspectors get confused. I get confused all the time. I'll show you a picture here of the side view of the IRC with all the amendments in it for the state I live in. And you can see how it can be confusing. And that's just one code book. We have the commercial building code, we have fire codes, we have full-on plumbing codes that go above and beyond just residential. So don't beat up your inspector next time you see them, especially if they don't know right off the bat what the code reference is. So here, this is just a quick side view of the IRC. So this is like a 3-inch 3-ring binder. Every one of those yellow pieces of paper right there is an amendment from my state. So all the white is the actual code book, and then the state has gone in there and said, well, we're going to accept what you've written here, but we're going to change this one little thing. It's like, okay, all right. So we have to go in and make sure, well, whatever the adjustments are for the state are taken care of beyond just what the code has. The other thing is, and I didn't show you, if I go back here to emergency escape and rescue openings, is every time the code book has a little line like this, it means that it was added or adjusted from the previous code cycle. So if you're on the 2015 code and you hop over to the 2018 code and you see this, well, that means it was added or changed. So you can see how the code book evolves over the years. If you come from another state, right, and you're under the 2015 code, and the state you moved to is under the 2021 code, and you've been doing things this way, but then all of a sudden your inspector calls it another way, and you're like, why? I've been doing it this way for 20 years. Well, it's because the codes change, and as I just kind of showed you, they can just all over the place. You look in your code book, you'll see those little black lines all over the place. Things that were changed and adjusted. Could have just been one word, or the whole blurb could be new, right? You don't know. But there you go. that's how to kind of get through a code book if you've got one, if you're thinking about getting one, which one to get, and how to kind of start navigating it and finding the answer you're looking for. This has Ben with Building Code Tips. Like the video below, subscribe, and you can also check out buildingcodetips.com for guides and blogs and all types of information, all for homeowners and do-it-yourself.